Hey everyone, we are getting ready to record episode. Oh my gosh, what episode is this? This is episode 440 of For Mac Guys Only. 440 episodes. And we are waiting on Eric to join us. He should be with us in just a moment. Thank you all for joining us. I see you out there in the chat room and watching the show. Thank you for being here. I promise we will not take a half an hour to get started this time like we did last week. At least that's not the plan. The plan is to get started relatively quickly this week so that we can get to editing the show and getting it out on time next week. Going to have a sip of my lovely beverage here. I did trade text with Eric just a short while ago, and yes, he is planning not only to be with us this week, but he will be bringing the Essential app this week. And for the first time in a while, I've got a little bonus tip this week, something that happened to adjust my microphone here. I didn't realize it wasn't right in front of me. Sorry about that. Something that occurred this morning, and I realized that would be a great tip for the show this week. So we'll have that to cover as well. This is essentially going to be a, well, we've called them a palooza episode where we tackle listener questions and provide the answers here on the show. And this is going to be a palooza, but a little bit different. I have used the title in the past, a listener palooza of one. I'm not going to use that. This episode actually comes about because of a series of emails we traded with one listener in particular, Eric and I both, and an interesting journey that this listener has been on the past couple weeks in more ways than one. Some ways we're not going to talk about on the show, other ways that we are, especially when it comes to things related to her Mac. But yeah, just this incredible series of emails that all three of us were involved in, and I kind of cherry picked. I'll mention this as we get to recording. I kind of cherry picked a couple questions that I thought might be of general interest to you, the listeners. So that's going to be the primary focus. But there's also a follow-up at the beginning of the episode that I want to have specifically because it's something that Eric has tried, and I want to know how well it worked for him, because if it worked for him, it's definitely going to be something that I roll out myself. And speaking of Eric, he is just now joining us, but he's not there. Where is he? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
His
I'm not
visage
there?
is missing. Oh, there he is.
There I am. Can you hear me?
Phew, panic is over.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, you're not on your mic though. I think you're on a different mic.
No, I am on. Geez, this should be okay. I don't know why it's not working. Does this sound any better?
Yeah, a little bit better. Yeah.
Why is this? Okay, you know what?
Now,
maybe I'll turn up the gain.
Let's see. What is it? I heard that the proper distance for a lav mic is 1 hang 10 from your chin.
1 hang 10 from your chin. So I probably had that before.
I just read that the other day. 1 hang 10 from your chin is... Now, they didn't say, should it be a narrow hang 10 or should it be a wide hang 10? Should it be devil horns? Maybe it's devil horns.
Your typical hang 10.
Yes.
Let's see.
We could do devil horns. We could say,
yeah, devil horns are good.
That's a Chuck Joyner thing. We'll have Chuck on sometime to talk about throwing devil horns at concerts, but you would never imagine it, but that's a Chuck Joyner thing.
That is really what music?
Well, music I don't listen to. Let's just put it that way.
but I may. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah,
is
you
he,
might. You might.
More of a metal guy, or
More of a, believe it or not, this
Oh yeah.
straight-laced, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, Chuck. I apologize if I am.
I
But
hey,
this,
I didn't think I could respect him anymore, and now I'm even
uh,
more. So
and see,
that's
I'm a prog rock kind of guy, so I don't really get into the metal. Although it is
I like prog rock
interesting,
too.
a lot of, you know, hard rock, what we called hard rock back in the 70s and 80s,
Yep.
is playing on easy listening stations now.
I
And
know.
it, it's a sad
Yeah,
state of affairs, but that's where we're
it
at.
is actually. No kidding. It really.
Good morning to Brian in the chat room. Hello, Brian.
Good morning, Brian. Yeah.
Glad you could join us. I was giving a quick
Is
rundown of the run of show here, real quick. What we had talked about, discussing the burr in my saddle that is Sequoia's permission issue, and your experiences with trying to get around it. Because I have not upgraded my Macs yet, so I've not been able to experiment with this. And then I also mentioned the 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 series of emails that we've traded with one listener in particular the past couple weeks that's leading to this Palooza episode of For Mac Guys Only.
Yeah, 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 definitely a lot of good questions in there, and a lot of yeah, for sure. Now, before we, I want to ask, is the audio any better? I did turn up the gain, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Is
it
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 any
is
different?
better. Yeah, it's better.
Okay. I was picking up room noise before. I was picking up. I have a OWC RAID for RAID 4 drive RAID box, and the fans are fairly loud, and
Mm.
so I was trying to. I finally just shut it off because I was trying to get that out of the sound because I was picking it up when I was testing the mic, and so I turned the gain way down, and I think that probably just made things worse. So
What
I
about the
ended up shutting
XLR
off the
mic?
drive.
Have you tried the XLR mic again? Is that
No, I thought I would do this. I thought I would do the lav mic because well, it was a different version, but I did have good luck with that. I have used it on other episodes a long time ago, and I thought, oh, this will work. It should
yeah,
work, but
yeah, it'll work.
maybe not.
So I probably should start off before we start recording. I'll start off with how I fixed that horrendous echo in the last episode. It was atrocious. I mean, if you go back and you listen to the raw YouTube recording, you know, as we call it, our warts and all recording. That's what these
Yeah.
are. That's what these YouTube
Yep.
live streams are, is the warts and all. And then I have to try to fix it when all is said and done, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if you go back and you listen to that, the echo in the room was just awful on your end because you couldn't use that
Yeah.
XLR mic.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I was
Ugh.
playing with various solutions to try to get rid of that echo, including a couple tools that I own, and they just were not able to take care of it. But I will tell you what I did end up using, and this is not the company I normally go to first, but Adobe has a new series of AI driven podcasting tools.
Oh, okay.
They're not free.
Yeah.
It is a $10 per month subscription, but there's a 30-day trial, and it's a unencumbered trial. In other words, you can use it for 30 days, and there's no watermarking or anything. You can just use it.
Use it. Yep.
And after trying to come to terms with how it worked, because it's relatively simple. You drag your audio file into it, and it does its
Yeah.
thing, right? But there's a enhancement slider that you have to play with a little bit. And if I went a little bit too much in one direction, it was just too bizarre. And if I went in the other direction, it still had some echo. So I found this spot in their
Happy
slider,
medium.
a little happy medium. I think it was 75% strength I used. And there's still a tiny bit of echo, but oh my gosh, it did an amazing job clearing it all up. So I signed up for if you don't sign up for the trial, you can only do a a couple minutes. I think that was the
Yeah.
limitation on it. So I signed up for the trial. I got 30 days, and it did a pretty decent job. So if you listen to the audio, the official release of the episode, your side of the conversation was run through the Adobe AI
Fixer.
podcasting tools.
It
And
did.
it turned out
Is
okay.
is there anything that you could run through to actually make me sound smarter, or like actually know what I'm talking about besides just the echo? The echo would be great to get rid of, but just the
Well,
boy, it sounds good. Yeah.
in my case, it's something I call the Eric filter, where everything that comes out of my mouth gets filtered through your ears and brain, and then intelligentized
Yeah. No.
as you respond with what I should have said in the first place. But short of that, no, I
Yeah.
have not
You weren't able to
figured
find
out.
anything. I
Yeah,
I don't
judicious
think that
editing.
exists.
Judicious
Yes.
editing. That's yes. And
That's what you do. Actually, your judicious editing does. I think it definitely it helps me. That's for sure. I was gonna say, yeah, I use this, and I think I sent it to you for one for an issue on a Mac stock Echo. It's a plugin by Accentize. I think it's
mm,
called D-Revive or something, but
hmm
it's really good it's another AI tool. These AI tools are really great. I mean,
yeah.
they've really gotten good. Um, it makes it really simple, and it gets rid of the echo really pretty good. I kind of have a setting where it seems to work pretty good for me, and I mean,
Yeah.
there's a few artifacts every now and then, but I mean, it really makes it a lot better.
Well, the problem with that tool in particular was the cost. Uh,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
couldn't use it without buying it or subscribe. I
right.
can't remember if it's purchase or subscription. Either way,
It's a
um,
it's a one-time purchase, but it's like $100. Yeah,
yeah.
I got it on a deal when I got it,
So
but yeah,
I like the 30 days free. That worked really
yeah. The
well with my
30-day
budget.
free is really good. Yeah,
Uh,
no,
Now, it
yeah,
turns out there's other tools. This $10 a month is not just for the podcasting tools. There are other tools available, including a ginormous amount of online storage. And so I'm half tempted to keep the subscription, but I don't know. I don't know. It's $10 a month to Adobe, and I just still have this thing in my head about paying
yeah.
any of their subscriptions since they cut me off and made me pay. Well, what was it going to be, like $300 a year for the tools that I was paying roughly $400 every couple years to upgrade it for
Yeah.
perpetual
Yep.
licenses? So
Oh, I think it was more than that probably. I think I figured it out. It's like more like 600 some dollars a
oh
year.
yeah,
You know,
actually I think you're right. Was
it
$50 a month? Yeah, six
yeah,
hundred
50
bucks a
bucks a
year.
month, or it's like 62. I think it's like 62 now.
It's gone up.
Yeah, I know I've told you I use them. I use their stuff, but only because I get it for roughly around $30 a month, and they renew me every year. And, or not renew me every year. They always try to renew me at the 62. And I'm like, I'm out. And they're like,
Yeah.
hey, would you stay on for 30? I'm like, okay. And so, because I do have enough stuff tied up into their tools and some of the tools aren't available elsewhere, like After Effects. Um, but, and actually their Audition, their audio tool is
Mm,
actually really good too. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I I
So
I was fortunate that I never used Audition. I never used Premiere. I never used After Effects. I never used anything
yeah,
that would lock me in.
yeah,
I was almost strictly Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. That was it. And InDesign was always the sticking point. You could find
yeah,
tons of apps that can open Illustrator files and open Photoshop files. The Affinity apps being my number one choice.
the
But
best. Yeah,
those InDesign files, and by extension, my older PageMaker files, were always the sticking point. Um, I actually came up with a fantastic, and this is not free, but you can get a perpetual license, a tool called ID Marks,
Yeah, I think you mentioned that.
IDMARKZ.
Yeah.
And it does a really, really good job of converting InDesign files to IDML files, which is the kind of open format that applications like Affinity Publisher can read. Um, but it can also do other conversions, like converting a PDF to an IDML or converting an InDesign file to a PDF, all different kinds of
Yeah.
cool things. Because Affinity Publisher, does a really, really good job of opening up PDFs that haven't been flattened, I should say, opening up PDFs and making them editable.
Yeah.
So if you can get a PDF of a document that was created in InDesign and it hasn't been bitmapatized, um,
Right.
you
Which
can
is
open it.
yeah, which is sort of it, I don't know why. I mean, like you said, bitmapatized. It sort of defeats the purpose of having the PDF. Why don't you
Yeah.
just send me a picture then?
Well, there's a lot of
I
folks
know.
that create PDFs, but that don't realize that when you create a PDF of an image, you're really just embedding that image within the PDF. You're not
Right.
really
Right.
coming up with any great advantages by creating making a
Yeah.
PDF out of it, other than the person on the other end might have a better chance of figuring out how to open it. If you
Yeah.
send somebody
Right.
a ping or a tiff or whatever, sometimes there's confusion on the other end. What do I use to
Right.
open this? Especially if the default editor, I was going to say opener, the default
Yeah.
editor
Right.
for tiffs or pings or whatever has changed,
Yeah.
and they're no longer associated with an app, or something got messed up on the operating system, and they just don't know how to open them. Or goodness gracious, they open in your browser or something silly like that. But
Yeah.
um, that would be one advantage to converting to a PDF, because most people have some sort of PDF reader on their computer.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
yes, they have
I should
TIFF readers too. They just don't necessarily know it.
know it. Right. And what even better, yeah, or even worse, I should say, is like if you had it, if it was an HEIC file or whatever, then you
Right.
set,
Right.
that it probably just won't even open. I mean, depending upon the person and the computer,
Right.
that's like just not, and it isn't everywhere yet. That's for sure.
No.
I I was going to say there is one
Sending
other
it to a
Adobe app
Windows
I've been
user.
using.
Yeah.
Yeah, Windows. Yeah, no, totally. And probably outside of like Microsoft Edge, I don't even know. Yeah, uh, is Adobe Acrobat. Even though I have a
Hmm.
love hate relationship with it, I had to do these forms, which I'm going to have to show you. But I was trying to make them fillable online and make it easier to do stuff. And so that app is, it's just, I don't, in some ways you can't believe that the same company that wrote Photoshop wrote that app. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
Well,
It what I really love is when it says you have a this font is embedded. You can't make changes because it doesn't have a font. Yeah, it doesn't
mm,
actually have that font available, but it doesn't tell you
hmm,
what font it is
right.
or what field it's having a problem with. It just tells you that, and then it says it'll substitute it with a font that's not anywhere near as like the font that is in there. And what I always run into is it's Calibri from Word. Somebody creates a PDF with
Mm,
Word. They use that Calibri font, and I think Microsoft is proud that they have a font that looks better than Arial, maybe a little bit. I don't know. And so you can't get that font anywhere. It's
you
like
can.
embedded inside.
You
Oh,
can.
how do you
You
get it?
you can download it from Microsoft. Do a Google search. You'll find Microsoft's official download page for those fonts. You can,
Okay, I
yeah,
got to
you
do
can get
that.
them.
Ugh.
It's hidden. You got to do a little searching, but you'll find it. Um,
Okay.
I was going to ask. Well, Okay, first I'm going to make a statement. We'll get to recording here in just a moment. I promised people when the live stream started, I promised that we were going to get to the show and not have a half-hour delay like we did last week or last time.
Yeah.
But one quick comment. One of the saddest things to me in the Apple world in the last few years was Smile Software selling off PDF Pen. That effectively
Yeah.
killed that application. You can still find it, you can still get it in the Mac App Store, but it has not been updated no development work has been done on it at all since this new Windows PDF-based company purchased it. Instead, they want you to subscribe to their what is it called, Nitro PDF. They want you to subscribe to
Oh,
that and not,
right.
don't use PDF Pen anymore. That's an old product.
Right.
Use
Yeah.
this new
Use Nitro.
Nitro PDF for the Mac. Well, sorry, I'm not gonna do that.
No.
So the question and the happy development in the Apple world the last few years are the advances that Apple has made with Preview. It doesn't
Yes.
on the surface, it doesn't look like much has changed, but one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest leaps that it has made in recent years is the ability to create fillable fields in a PDF, and it does an amazing job of it. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing
I love
job.
Preview.
You just click
I
that
love
little
Preview.
button, and it creates all the fillable fields for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a little extra stuff that I needed to do with JavaScript and everything. So, and unfortunately, Preview can't handle that yet. But I think Preview is just it's one of the it's just a great app. I mean, it's always been a great application. And not that I ever liked Acrobat Reader, but as soon as I started using Preview, I immediately hated every other PDF reader, especially Acrobat. And it's just, I mean, it's just beautiful. It's fast, it's light, it has features, but it doesn't like throw them in your face. It just, and yet it's really easy to use. I was going to say Nitro. I do have that app. I don't subscribe to it, but I have Set App, and it's on Set App. So I have. I didn't even realize it was a subscription itself. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not bad. It's definitely not. It's a decent PDF, but it's not something I use a
I
real lot.
I guess if you're going to get it for free, that's one thing. Um,
Yeah.
what is the name? Here's what bugs me the most about Adobe Reader. What is the name of the McAfee security app that Adobe bundles with it by default on Windows systems? It's
Oh,
McAfee. We'll just call it Secure Scan. I can't remember what it's called. But
yeah, something like that.
if you're not paying attention, if you're downloading Adobe Reader for Windows and you're not paying attention, you don't unclick that little box,
Ugh,
they automatically install this stupid McAfee secure scan
yeah.
software on Windows computers. It was almost like an epidemic. I couldn't figure out why so many client computers were suddenly getting this McAfee security software installed. I'm like, why
Ugh,
why are these people suddenly going out and deciding that they want this software installed? Well, they weren't. They were downloading
no.
updates to Adobe Reader, and it was just sticking it on their computer, whether they wanted it or not. And I think that's one of the most annoying things that Adobe has done with Reader in recent years. Unfortunately, they're
Oh my
not doing
gosh.
anything similar with the Mac, but yes, that's quite annoying.
But I think as Mac users probably on, on unfortunately that happens a lot in the Windows world. I think, the whole
Mm.
opt out thing. In fact, actually, it was a number of years ago. Apple tried it. Didn't they try it with?
A U2 album. They,
Was
they,
it? Well, yeah. No, that right. But no, it was like with Safari on Windows. It either came with
oh,
something else or it was something else that came with
I don't
Safari that you
remember
had
that.
to actually. But I remember actually you did an episode on it saying, "Come on, this
Did
isn't."
I?
this is not
Well,
what you do. I mean,
if nothing else,
it,
Safari on Windows was just atrocious. It was an awful,
yeah, it was an awful attempt. And
goodness gracious.
yeah, and the heads at Firefox got all upset about it for absolutely no reason whatsoever. They should have maybe
No,
used it first because they got really upset. I remember when they Apple released Safari for Windows, the head of Firefox came out and said a bunch of stuff, and I couldn't figure out why. I was like, what does it matter? But anyway, it lasted for what, a year and a half, 2 years, and then it was gone. So
well,
it's
thank
Safari.
goodness.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
They really, Apple, you have to give Apple credit for doing the absolute least they could do when creating apps for Windows computers. I mean, it
Yeah.
was the bare minimum that was necessary in order to sell iPods and then later phones to Windows users.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
if it got Windows
although
users to drop Windows and go to a Mac, all the better. And I'm sure there was a little of that in Apple's thinking when they created these apps.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. But I think their hardware, the iPod or the iPhone, did more for the Mac switcher than their iTunes app.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if you're creating an absolutely awful app for Windows, and this is a Windows user's view
Yeah.
at it gives them a peek at the their future experience using a Mac.
Right.
That's not a great tactic either. I didn't explain that very well, but
No, 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 no. But
that's why all this gets lopped
everybody
out. This
gets
is
this.
all pre-show. None of this gets recorded.
It's showed. It never shows up.
And if it does make the show, it gets edited so I sound reasonably intelligent with what I was saying. And I cut out most of what I say and I inject what you say. And then,
Yeah,
it
right.
makes me look like I was smart for bringing up the topic. But
Although in the case of iTunes, Jobs was his whole thing was that that was supposed to show Windows users how you do an app. That
yeah,
that was an actually good. So, but the problem was they didn't follow any of the Windows UI um,
no.
standards or anything like that. They should have went that way and just Anyway,
Well, Apple doesn't really follow any of their own UI
their own.
standards
I know.
that they impose upon third-party developers. They don't follow them themselves when it comes to
Right.
the apps that ship with the Mac. So, what
Well,
can you do?
they don't have to. It's do as I say, not as I do.
It's like, oh, okay. So I'm not I am aging myself when I say this, but keep in mind I was a very, very young lad when this was on television. But there was a show called Laugh-In, which was a sketch comedy show,
Oh, yep. Rowan and
and
Martin.
one of the sketches was a telephone operator, and the just flat out rude behavior that they exhibited when it came to interacting with folks who might have made or might have had the misfortune of pressing zero to call the operator for help.
Right.
And the joke, the line that was this was a little Lily Tomlin, by the way. The line that she uttered more often than not is, we're the telephone company. We don't care because we don't have to.
We don't
And
have to.
yeah,
Yep. That's it. We don't care. We don't have. No, that was. And then she
yeah.
said, "Sock it to me." No, I.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that was another sketch, but yeah,
Yeah. No, that that was exactly right. That was, they were the monopoly,
yeah,
and
yeah. This is
until
all
it got
pre
broke up. But
AT&T breakup, by the way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, let's get to
Yeah.
recording the show. So, I texted you the general run of show. I
Yes.
would like to get your feedback on your experiences with the screen recording permission
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into the questions. I
Yeah.
sent you the
That
three
sounds good.
questions. Did you have any questions from
Yes.
our conversations with Lisa that you wanted to add to this? There's a bug flying around over here.
No. No, I don't think so. I think
Okay,
that
we'll go with these
yeah.
general interest type questions, and we'll go with these. So we're about 24 minutes in. We've got Brian in the chat room. You probably saw I popped up his comment about
Yeah.
he's thrilled with the innovations that Apple has made in preview over the last few years, and I am too. It's
Yeah.
getting easier and easier to recommend preview as the sole PDF editor. I think editing text within a document is about the only major shortfall within it right at the moment. That
Right.
my creaky old copy of PDF Pen Pro that I still have on my Macs can do that preview cannot do. But
Cannot do.
an
Yeah.
old tip we shared on the show was the ability to merge PDFs within preview and how you can rearrange the pages and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And that was years
I
ago.
use it all the time.
It's such a
Yeah.
powerful tool. But the power's hidden in the menu toolbar. You have to know to click that little pen in the circle, and if
Right.
you don't click it, you miss all these amazing tools that are embedded in there.
And that's kind of one of those things that sort of do you do that or do you not? I mean, there's something to be said for keeping that stuff hidden, but having it available for people that really want to do that or want to whatever, versus having all these icons or whatever menu options that people are like, what is this? What is that?
Exactly.
Final Cut Pro has menus that are like this long. I mean, and I always kind of thought that if you have them that long, you're probably not doing something right. But I mean, it's needed, and I do rather have stuff in the menu where I can find it. I'm not a big fan of the ribbon bar in Office, and so but yeah, at the same time, I think who's ever developing preview for Apple, I think they've got it, mostly right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really just well done.
It's the silent killer app on the Mac.
It is.
It's there by default when you double click a PDF or you double click a JPEG or PNG or what
Yep.
have you. It's there. It opens. And when you take a moment to explore the power of that app, I mean, even just working with images, there's a lot of great tools in there, and you simply
Yeah.
do not need to open up. In fact, their PDF optimization is really good. When you have this large PDF and you need to be able to reduce it in size, the PDF
Yeah.
optimization tools that are built into Preview are really good too. But I digress.
You could probably spend a whole episode on just preview. Seriously.
We had a fantastic talk at MacStock on Preview. That was it.
Yeah.
The whole talk was on Preview, and it was just
Preview.
even for folks who do dig into the tools, it was an eye-opening talk because there were so many things in it that you know I heard and said, "Wow, okay, cool. I didn't know you
Yeah.
could do that." And you just add it to your
Yep.
repertoire.
Yeah. I think I saw that, or I saw that on the video. I was impressed with that. And it just kind of made me more of a preview user than I already was, even though I thought I used it anyway. So
That's one of the great things about sitting in on
Max Talk.
talks. Not just, I mean, at MacStock, sure,
Yeah.
sitting in on the talks at MacStock, but just sitting in on webinars and casual conversations like this, just being that fly on the wall it's amazing the amount of information you can absorb just sitting there listening to someone else share their experiences with apps or with the Mac or with the phone or what or different streaming television services. We have Brian in the chat room, and he
Yes.
came on to talk about that. And
Yeah.
in fact, we'll have to have him come on again once DirecTV launches their free streaming service, which is supposed to be coming in, what, November? I think that's coming.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No account needed, no subscription fee, just tons of free TV. And I'm curious, uh, uh, Brian's experiences with that. This just popped into my head last night. It's great he's in the chat room because it just popped into my head last night. His experiences with that versus the Roku channel or Tubi or any of
Right.
the other uh, free to stream services that are out there and how they compare to the new DirecTV one that's coming. But
Yeah. Seriously. When you had him on, I learned more things in that episode, I think, than I ever. And just, and we've you've had a lot of great people on too. So that was now even with his pick, his app pick, I think, which was the webcam. I still bring
yeah,
that up. The
yeah, the
Arizona,
website
the park. Yeah, that's just
with the
awesome.
with the
The fountain.
fountain, yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I first wrote down that we're going to start at 24 minutes in, and we're now at 29 minutes in. In fact, we're
29. All
pushing
right.
30 minutes in. So I think we should get started. 30
I
minutes
will
is
shut
about
up.
our time to stop gabbing, Eric, and
Yep.
start gabbing. So
Yes.
we'll get started here. Excuse me. In three, two, one. It's for Mac Guys Only, episode number 440 for October 11th, 2024. Mac Migrate-a-palooza. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Guys Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me, as always, to discuss all things Mac is my For Mac Guys Only co-host, Eric Erickson. Howdy, Eric. How are you doing this week?
Pretty good. How are you, Mike?
I'm
I am.
doing great. It's
Me
October,
too.
fall is in the air, Halloween is just around the corner, and the holidays will be not too far behind that. And I know we'll be having some holiday episodes of From Mac Guys Only coming up soon, too.
Is it cooled off there? Because here it's still just miserably hot.
Oh, it's amazingly beautiful up here, Eric.
Oh, ah, I should just move up there. I should just move to Illinois.
Remember, we do normally record for Mac Guys Only live on YouTube the second and fourth Friday of the month. And if you would like to come hang out, ask questions, and be part of our live studio audience, be sure to subscribe to the show at youtube.com/FMEOTV. And if you are joining us live, I'm going to be keeping an eye on that chat room too. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, be sure to preface it with a Q, or heck, just drop your comment in the chat room and we'll try to address it here on the show. Eric, I do have a quick programming update for October. Due to a family event coming up, this will likely be our only episode this month. Now, the wild card, of course, is whether Apple holds a Mac event this month or not. But even if they do, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to take part. But I would hate for it to be the first reaction time episode that we have missed since we started doing them.
Yeah.
But first, of course, Apple needs to announce an event. And to
Right.
the best of my knowledge, they have not done so yet. But
No,
rumor is they may, and we may have it coming our way in just over a week. Now, if it's next week, that would be great.
that
But if
would
it's
be.
the week of the 21st, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. You'd almost think if it was next week, they would have announced
They would
it.
have announced it already. Yeah, because they're going to do
Yeah.
it on a Monday or Tuesday. But that's the programming note for October. We will be back again, of course, in November. Uh, should be able to have 2 episodes in November and then at least one in December. The fall is always
Yeah.
really tough. It's tough because we
Yeah.
have the holidays and they very often
Yep.
fall on the weeks that we normally record. So we just have to figure out if we can squeeze some episodes in here and there throughout the next few months. But never fear, we will be back. We're not going on hiatus again like we did those years back.
Those, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
But but obviously your trip is more important than the reaction time anyway. So, and to be honest with you, I think it's just hype. I don't think they're gonna announce anything in October. I really don't. They
I
were
have my doubts. Yeah.
they were talking about. I know that the M4 MacBook Pros and all that stuff were supposed to be announced in the fall and stuff like that. I just either they will and they'll just kind of come out quietly, or they'll be put off. I think. I just don't. I don't know. I don't see
I
anything.
expect perhaps a silent release. They've done that in the past
Yeah.
too. I don't
Yeah.
know if the mini maybe if the rumors of a mini are true. Um,
Right.
Maybe that's something Apple would want to trumpet a bit, but I
Right.
don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say,
Yeah.
and there hasn't been anything super concrete indicating that this really is happening this month. So
No.
it's the same loose rumors over and over, and many of them I'm starting to suspect are written by AI. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Not only that, it's like it seems like the rumors kind of change. It seems like every time I see another rumor, it's like something else.
Mhm.
It's like one thing is laptops, another thing is like I forget what it was, but it's just you're like, okay, this people are just grabbing at straws, or like you said, it's just AI.
AI driven, yeah.
Yeah.
But I did want to open this week with a short discussion about the bug that has been in my bonnet with Sequoia, and that is the new screen sharing nag that Apple has added with the release of macOS 15. I know. We talked about this in the last few episodes, but when faced with the prospect of clicking allow over 180 times per year, I did the math. I looked up the apps that look for screen recording permissions, multiplied that times 12. That's over
Wow.
180 times per year that Apple is asking me to click allow for these apps to run properly. This is, to me, a pretty big issue. And it's actually
It
one that
is.
I hope Apple eventually realizes was about as smart as iPod socks. But in my rant a couple episodes back, I suggested that maybe someone will come along with a simple hack to bypass this latest insanity. And the good news is that not only does a terminal hack exist, but a few developers have stepped forward with apps to help circumvent the issue. Most of them are free, but one in particular is called Amnesia, and it is from none other than the developer of Mac Whisper, which we've talked about here on the show before. That developer's name is Jordy Bruin, and he developed Amnesia along with co developer Antoine van der Lee. But for those who prefer the terminal, or maybe I should say the non app route, in what may or may not be the inspiration for Amnesia, there is a post on Jeff Johnson's blog called simply Stop macOS 15 Sequoia Monthly Screen Recording Prompts. That's the name of his blog post, in which not only does he credit Ricky Adams with the find, but apparently Ricky does not have his own blog, so Jeff Johnson took it upon himself to create this post. He credits Ricky Adams with the find, but he describes in detail the steps that are required to stop the screen recording permission prompt insanity that comes with macOS Sequoia. The only hitch being it's on a per app basis. Now, Eric, I had sent you links to that article, and I sent you links to Amnesia, I believe, as well. Um, and I know you tried that terminal hack first. Can you describe the process a bit, and then, I guess more importantly, how did it work for you?
Yeah, it seems to be working really well. So You said on a per app basis, but it updates the file in, I'm trying to think, it's in the library folder, and that file contains all of the apps that have screen recording permissions, and it basically updates the timestamp on there. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the actual name of the files, but um, although I could look it up quick, but it updates all of those. So, and what it does is it's a shell script, and it updates all of those uh, lines in there. That essentially one for each app. And I was going to say, I yeah, 180 times. I just saw that. Mine, I think I figured out was 108, which I thought was a lot. So I think mine is in, there's 9 lines in there, and it updates it with essentially a new date that's like a month ahead of time. No, I'm sorry, 100 years ahead. And each day you essentially run the shell script, or you put it, set it up with either a cron trigger or something like that, um, to run it. I think you can set it up with like launch D, install a launcher, an app launcher, and have it go. What I ended up using was Keyboard Maestro, and because you can run shell scripts right within Keyboard Maestro. I had a little trouble with the permissions, but if I ran it within something like Keyboard Maestro or within Code Runner, it works fine. So it probably because those have the necessary permissions they need. But I put it inside of Keyboard Maestro, and I set up a trigger, like a cron trigger that runs at 4 o'clock every day and runs the shell script. And then I also stuck another trigger in there that said when the computer wakes up, when the Mac wakes up, run this. And I have a little variable check in there to see if it's already ran. If it has, then it won't update it again if it's already run on that day. I did the wake trigger though, just thinking that in case the Mac's asleep, when 4 o'clock rolls around and then it just doesn't update it, so the wake trigger will take care of that. But so far, it's been really good. Now, I don't know that it's been an entire month yet, although it's getting close. I think I want to say it was probably September 17th
Mm.
when some of this got updated. But I will have to say, and I do want to check out Amnesia because I think that's more than just the screen recording, right? Can't you use that for other dialogues as well, or is it simply just
Amnesia is specifically for this
screen,
this
right?
problem. Yeah.
This problem, because I I click so many stupid permission dialogues every day, and it's just for I can't. I think just even today I clicked 3 different ones, and I'm clicking them all the time. So not that I want to have an extra 108, and I don't. I want to get rid of that, and I think this is great. But I'm doing so many now. I don't know that I'm going to notice. It's like, and these are just all one-time things, I think. But it's just like, do you want to allow this app to have network? Do you want to allow this app to, you know, connect to your contact? It's just like all the time, and it's like, and I get it, and I totally get the security thing, but Apple is just, this is like Windows Vista. I mean, it's just gone nuts with this, and
Yeah.
it's just annoying, is what it is. Especially if you're any kind of user, if you have 3 apps installed and you mainly just use Mail and Safari, you're fine because apparently those apps don't need permission. But anything else, ugh.
Well, apparently, I'm not the only one who referred to this as Mac OS Vista. In fact, there's a number of people who have done so
A number
since
of
my
people.
rant a couple weeks ago. I'm not giving myself credit for it. I probably heard it somewhere else myself, but this is exactly what Apple was making fun of in the
I
Mac
know.
versus PC ads. So it's kind of hard to get behind this and say, you know, dudes, make up your mind.
Yeah.
But I did look up real quick. I went to Jeff Johnson's blog post, and we're going to link to this in the show notes. The plist file that you're talking about, and I won't give the big long um, uh, folder structure for where it's found, but it is in your home library. It's under group containers, group.com.apple.replayd, replay daemon.
Group
Um,
containers. Yep.
yeah, screen capture approvals.plist. Now, what I was referring to in when I said that it was on a per app basis is that within the plist file, there is an entry for each app that
Each.
requires it,
Right.
and each
Yep.
one of those lines needs to be touched. So
Touch.
you're
Yep.
not just changing one date. You do have to change the date for each app that's looking for the screen recording permission. And as
Yes.
you
Yep.
pointed out, the way this works, and in their example, they're talking about Shotter, which is a screen capture app. Um, they show how it might be dated, 2024-09-21, and then you go in and you modify it to, let's say, 3024-09-21. So you're putting it 1,000 years into the future,
Years in the future. Yeah.
and that then tells the Mac, oh yeah, this has permission, and it doesn't nag you anymore about that particular app. So that's, as you indicated, the gist. You need to have access to this via terminal. Terminal then, by extension, needs to have full disk access. Talk about permissions. It itself needs full disk access permissions to get to
I
this
know.
file and allow you to edit it. But then you can go in and you can edit this file and extend the dates into the future. Now, there's a little snag with that with 15.1, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But that's great, especially if you're a keyboard jockey and you want to go in and do what you did and write a custom script to manage this and schedule it with. You're using cron to do it, or
No, I'm using Keyboard Maestro. Keyboard Maestro has like triggers for everything. One of them being a cron trigger,
okay.
and so yeah, in a way I am, and then another one for a wake trigger. So I was just looking at you can do like a default read of um, that plist, and so I'm looking at it. It looks like it was updated yesterday at 4 o'clock, and so it's got 10, 10, 21, 24. So it's the shell script, and I didn't write the shell script. This is whoever you sent me, I think, and I'll
Mm.
have to find it, the link to it. But this in this particular case, it updates it 100 years into the future, and this kind of comes up with, and I think you were going to maybe mention this. I think the updating it every day thing is a good thing, because we were thinking, what happens if when it does come around every month for these apps, and is it going to look at it and say, oh, I need to, it's not the current day, it's not the current date, whatever, I need to update this. So
That
yeah.
was your very question. The very first thing you asked me was, well, what
Yeah.
happens when this date comes up? Um,
Yeah.
so Amnesia kind of steps in to the middle there rather than needing to deal with scripts. By the way, Amnesia can be downloaded for free. You it's a name your own price type app. So kind of takes a play from the old days of shareware where you can download an app and test it and make sure it works for you, and then you contribute to the developer. I
Yeah.
have done that with Mac Whisper and some of the other apps that Jordy Bruin has put out. I download it, give it a try, and I'm like, well, this is dang awesome. And then I send in a
Yeah.
contribution. And I plan to do the same thing. In fact, I might just flat out buy Amnesia if it continues to do the job. And again, 15.1 is the key to that, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But Amnesia steps in the middle, and you run this app, and it literally lists every app that's looking for screen recording permissions, and you have a little button, and the little button says reset, or it might say disable reminders. So you click disable reminders, and it's it's it has now set that app as you indicated to some date in the future, so that you're not going to get nagged for that particular app screen recording permission. So it is a number of button clicks, but in theory, it should be one-time button clicks. Now,
Yeah. It's nice.
Jordy and Antoine do indicate that with the 1.1.5 release dated September 25th and the 1.1 release also dated September 25th, that they have added support for macOS 15.1. All right.
Mm.
So, yes, and I saw the comment from Brian in the chat room where he says 180 times the time it takes to do it, time is money. Time is money.
Yeah.
And
Time is money.
hopefully these don't all come up on the same day. Hopefully they all come up on different days, and it's a little bit less of a problem. But yeah, I calculate 180 because I went through. In fact, I took a screenshot of it here, and some of the apps that are currently requesting screen recording permissions on my Mac include 1Password for the QR code reader, Affinity Designer,
Yeah.
Affinity Photo, Affinity Publisher, Cursor Pro, Ecamm Live, iShowU Instant, iShowU 6, OBS, ProMouse, SnipPose, Splashtop Streamer, Strongbox, which is another password keeper, again, to read the QR codes that might show up on screen, VMware Fusion, and Zoom. Those are the apps installed on the particular Mac where I took this screenshot. Now, different Macs will be different. I don't know this particular one's list of apps, but that multiplied out times 12 is 180. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
No.
So, for those who enjoy a good rat hole, I'm going to link to a series of comments on Michael Tsai's blog, and I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, where not only did I find a link to the post by Jeff Johnson that we just discussed, but I also learned, and I'm incredibly relieved to read, that I'm not alone in this. In fact, it was downright
Oh.
reassuring to see and read how
Oh my
many
gosh.
people absolutely hate this change as much as I do, including many, many, many big names within the Apple community. Now, this page is worth revisiting because it's continually updated. And so this is Michael Tsai's blog post on this. And this is, again, this blog post is titled Sequoia Screen Recording Prompts and the Persistent Content Capture Entitlement. But it's just filled with comments from folks, and it's continually being updated. In fact, not only is Michael updating the post, but then beneath it, the comments also lead to some really interesting solutions and thoughts as well. But anyway, it's worth revisiting because some of the recent comments on this post included an open source tool for disabling the prompts as well. So if you're interested in, open source software community, this particular tool is called inventively macOS 15 Screen Capture Nag Remover. Great name. I think that would do well in the App Store if Apple allowed it in there. Unfortunately, the release notes for that app indicate that Apple might actually be doubling down on their efforts to annoy us in macOS 15.1 because they write, and I'm quoting here from the open source apps site, macOS 15.1 made a change to Replay D where upon each invocation of an app that requests screen capture permission, the timestamp in the plist is overwritten with the current date and time. The net effect is that if you use an app once and then don't use it again for over 30 days, you will be nagged again, even if you had previously disabled the nag. Okay, so that's the quote. Now, the implication of that is that if you use an app frequently, that might not be the case. But that also ties into what you were saying. It may be smart if you're going to be doing this to update on a daily basis, just to assure that you don't
Daily
get these
basis.
nags. Yeah, coming up.
And
Now,
that app that you just mentioned, that's the shell script I use.
okay.
That's actually the shell script. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
He
that's on GitHub, and that's
yeah,
Luckman212.
yep,
Okay.
yeah. And I
So
downloaded that, and that I think that takes care of it. It should take care of it. If it, you run it every day, that should help. And I also realized too, as you were reading your apps, I realized I haven't used some apps in a while, and so I'm going to get hit with those too. So I'll probably end up getting to the 180 times too. I
except
have
now,
108 now, but
doesn't your script, if your script is updating on a daily basis, though, wouldn't that circumvent the problem?
it should. Yep.
It should.
It
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Yep.
Okay. Um, Still, now, as I mentioned, Amnesia claims 15.1 compatibility, so there may be a mechanism within Amnesia to do the same thing, to do these updates
Same
on a
deal.
daily basis so that we avoid the issue. Certainly, if they claim compatibility, they must have tested it with it and,
Yeah.
probably set their max clock into the future to assure that it
Yeah.
was working as it should be. So
Yeah.
we'll just have to see what happens as time goes on. But I'm going to put a link to Michael Tsai's blog post, which is a fascinating, fascinating read. In fact, there are some amazing quotes in here. One of which, you know what, I'm going to read this one because this says it basically mirrors what I was saying in my rant, except perhaps a little bit better. Um, there is a commenter on here named Sebi who wrote, the system should just ask at some point, probably during setup, what kind of user you are. Would you like the system to
Yeah.
make all the important decisions for your security at the risk of having less control and being gated in our lovely community? Or would you like to exercise that control as an advanced user wanting to enjoy the opportunities of heading into the jungle out there with potential attendant risks? Yes, yes, that is
Yes.
exactly what I was asking for, and they said it perfectly. Whether it's done during setup, whether it's a terminal switch you can do, whether it's just a switch you can flip in settings, we need to have
Yep.
the ability to turn on a power user mode. That's it. I
Right.
don't see why every single user who has a Mac sitting in front of them needs to be nanny nagged when
Right.
there are users who are willing to accept the risk of not being nagged by any of these permission things. You mentioned all the permission requests that you get on an almost daily basis.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to deal with
Yeah.
that. You understand the consequences of having an app running in the background that might possibly be recording your screen or might possibly take advantage of your camera or your microphone or what have you. I shouldn't have to re reissue my blessing to the Mac to allow this app to run. I just want it to run,
Right.
gosh darn it. And I
Yeah.
think that that kind of power user, let me assume the risk. I will assume the risk. If something goes wrong, if the Mac breaks, if it melts into a pile of aluminum goo, I'm in trouble. But if it breaks, I like to think I have the knowledge to recover from that breakage. So give me the opportunity to make that decision myself, Apple, and don't make it for me. I understand on iOS, I understand on iPad OS. I don't necessarily like it in all cases, but I understand it. It's that consistency of behavior, but the Mac is not designed to be consistent. It's not designed to offer the same experience to every single user who utilizes a Mac. We each use it differently, and we should have that opportunity to do so.
And the thing of it is too, like you said, you can hide it in the terminal if you want to, so that only power users know where to find it, and put a big disclaimer on it. Say we are not responsible for your ignorance or your whatever for your if you run into trouble, it's on you,
Yeah.
due to one of these issues, and make you type in your password or you know touch ID, whatever, so that you're totally you're fully in. And, I think that would be perfect. And I think it should happen at setup, or whenever you do a migration or set up a new Mac or do whatever, do you want to get hit with, 100 of these, or yeah, it just
Yeah.
shouldn't have to be over and over and over again. It's just, I don't know.
Well, Brian brings up a good point, and this occurred to me earlier, and it's not a new phenomenon, but he mentions that he's heard too that having people click accept so much will numb them to the warning screens, and that's absolutely
It
true. And
does.
the term
That
for that is click fatigue,
Yeah.
and it's something that, talk about Vista, it really became an issue with Windows Vista. And there
Yeah.
is such a thing as click fatigue. And when people stop paying attention, that's
Yep.
when they're at the highest risk of being manipulated by third parties. So
Right.
yeah, it is an issue. Um, there has to be a balance somewhere.
There
But
does.
sometimes, as another commenter mentioned on a Michael Size post, there's a tipping point. There's a point at which you say, you know what, that's enough. I really don't want to
Yeah.
deal with this anymore. That was what
Right.
Microsoft dealt with Vista, and they quickly backpedaled and made changes to make the experience of dealing with a heightened level of security in Windows easier on users. And Apple may be heading towards that same tipping point where power users just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to move to something that gives me the freedom that I would like to have with my hardware.
It doesn't treat me like a 5-year-old that treats that I actually know what I'm doing and what's going on. And, I mean, it is one of those things where it's got to be, there's got to be a happy medium, and I'm totally on board with, getting, if I'm installing a new app, typing in the password. I think there are sensible security things that totally make sense. If there's
Yeah,
something that's trying to install on my machine, I want to know about it and I want to, approve it. But
absolutely. I get that.
this is just overboard.
I ran into Little Snitch is a fantastic application. I appreciate everything that Little Snitch does, but I quickly
Yeah.
became fatigued with the warnings. It
Yeah.
was just too much. And it wasn't really sharing anything with me that I didn't already know.
Right.
And as wonderful as it is to have this functionality at my disposal, it just was not something that worked for me as a user. But with Little Snitch, I had the choice. I had the choice to turn it off and say, thank you, Little Snitch. I
Silently
appreciate
allow.
it. I appreciate what you're doing for me, but go away. And I would like something like that in Mac OS as we move forward. I appreciate what you're doing for me, but go away.
But go away.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the silently allow?
Mm.
Because Little Snitch has a feature that basically where you can silently allow things, and that's what I have mine on, so that when new apps or whatever try to connect, Little Snitch will automatically approve them. You can still go in there and make the final approval, but you don't have to click approve each time something tries to connect or whatever.
And that's great.
And
And that's great.
yeah,
But then what good does that do you? What is the point of running Little Snitch and letting it silently allow if it's just going to silently allow everything? Why not
well,
just
and you can
not
make the
run it?
same argument. You could make the same argument with Apple and what they're doing too. If you say, "Well, I don't care. I just want to have you allow all these, what good is it having it?" And that's probably would be Apple's argument. But I will say with Little Snitch, you can, even though you silently allow, it doesn't permanently allow it. So you can set it back to alert, and it will alert on those apps that it already let through. but you can look at Little Snitch, which I do from time and see what's going on, and and still see what apps are getting through and what they're doing and everything else. So you still
Hmm.
have a monitor. You're just saying, I don't want to get alerted. I don't want to get, I don't have to click OK for each one of these things. And I think it's probably
Okay.
because they got the same sort of feedback. People like, I don't want to have to, I'm getting alerted all the time, and
Gotcha. Okay. So
that
you're
sort of
right. My
thing.
question was, what is the benefit of clicking silently allow versus not running the app at all?
Right.
And you just answered that question. The benefit is that you can always go in and see what has access and what doesn't have access, and make further changes based on what you're seeing within the Little Snitch dashboard. Cool.
Right.
In Apple's case, we're not given a choice. My choice with Little Snitch
No.
is run it or don't run it, or
Right.
silently allow. In Apple's case,
Silent alert.
it's you have to do this. We don't care.
We don't care.
We're Apple. We don't care
Yeah.
because we don't have to. And
Right.
that is, I think, what so many people find the most devilish
Aggravating.
about this is that
Oh,
we're not given the choice. So when people come along and they find where these settings are on the Mac and they document the methods to circumvent the insanity that Apple has foisted upon us,
yes.
that's what restores my faith in the Apple power user community.
I know.
Because
I know.
I wouldn't have found this. I wouldn't have dug through there to
Yeah.
find this and have the ability to figure out what it is and how to fix it and get around it. And yet, here's someone who did. And thank you. Thank you, thank
I
you,
was
thank
ready
you.
to. I was ready to with this whole screen sharing thing, but I'm just so glad that Luck 212 or whatever that this person has, and all the other people, like you're talking about Matt, the makers of Mac Whisper, and I mean it's just,
Yeah.
and you know what? There are so many great developers and coders out there that are just so smart and probably can whip this stuff up relatively quickly and save me days of just trying, but I would have wasted days on this if not weeks on this to get, and I think I sent that to you in an email saying somebody will figure this out, or if they don't I will, because I was not going to deal with this.
Right. So, from both of us, from everyone at Mac is only, thank you, Ricky Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff
Yes.
Johnson. Thank you to Jordy Bruin. Thank you to Antoine
Yeah.
Vanderlee. Thank you to Michael Tsai for doing such a great job with this blog post and highlighting the comments from throughout the community. And of course, thank you to, as you said already, Eric, Luckman212 for creating the open source nag remover. And thank you to everyone else who's working on this problem, because it's something that,
Yeah.
as a community, we need to come together and let Apple know this is not what we want, and hopefully have them listen in the end and go back on their decision. Will that happen?
Yeah.
I have my doubts.
I don't know.
But, um,
Yeah.
when the community speaks, I like to think that Apple listens, and the community is clearly speaking on this one. And thank you to
Oh, good.
everyone for
Yeah.
doing their job at raising awareness about this. Now let's get on to some fun stuff, Eric. The past few weeks, both of us have been trading emails with longtime listener and great friends of the show, Lisa and Steve. Not
Yep.
only were they faced with the prospect of a couple loyal but now aging Macs no longer getting updates from Apple, but they also wanted to kind of know the best way to move forward if they decided that getting new Macs was the way to go. And it was actually a fantastic discussion, not only because discussions like this can open our eyes to important decisions that users are faced with when Apple releases new versions of macOS every fall, but also the best ways to move forward when the time comes to buy new. Not only was it a great discussion, but we covered a lot of ground. It was hard for me to go through the emails and and pick out what the best topics would be to share here on the show, because we talked about the best external drives to purchase. We talked about how to migrate their
Yeah.
data. We talked about whether they should migrate their data. We talked about how to merge libraries, photo libraries, and music libraries. We talked about new apps to explore to help aid the process of moving to a new Mac. And we also talked about methods of backing up and keeping their data secure. But I went back through the emails and I cherry picked a few that I thought might be of general interest to For Mac Eyes Only listeners. But we won't stop there. I promise we won't stop there. In fact, I'm inviting everyone who has had to face similar decisions with their Macs or are actively facing similar decisions right now to reach out and let us know what types of questions that you have, and we will absolutely cover them here on the show. But I did want to start with the question that kicked off our conversation, and that is from Lisa. How long do you think I can keep working on macOS Monterey before the security on Safari and Mail is iffy? I know I can keep using Firefox as it will update, but not the others after a while. Am I good until the next security patch for the active OSs? Okay, so this is what kicked off the entire conversation. And I know you have some thoughts on this, Eric. My initial response was traditionally, Apple supports macOS with security patches for 2 years after that version is replaced. Does that make sense? So, like Sonoma
Yeah.
getting replaced with
Yeah.
Sequoia, right? So now we expect that for 2 years from this point, Sonoma will get security updates from Apple. That's the expectation. That's kind of been the tradition. Um,
Yeah.
but you can go longer if you like. Let's say, as Lisa pointed out, you switch to Firefox and Thunderbird for mail. Firefox for web browsing, Thunderbird for email. Or you switch to Firefox as your primary browser and stick to webmail. That's another great way to go. And just take Apple Mail out of the equation and any potential security issues that it might have moving forward. Of course, any other third-party mail client that remains supported
Hmm.
is also a great choice. Postbox. I'm probably going to name some that aren't even made anymore. But Microsoft's Outlook, Spark. What's the one that you use, Eric? You use a third-party mail client,
Uh,
don't you?
yeah. I'm using Airmail right now.
Airmail.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Yeah.
As long as these developers continue to support the version of macOS that you're running, great. Um, if you're concerned about iCloud and your information there, your contacts and calendars and all that kind of stuff, that's generally not as big of an issue. Contacts and calendars
Yeah.
and what have you. But you could switch to accessing your iCloud account via iCloud.com. And you can do so via Firefox.
Yeah.
That's going to work too, and it's going to feel very much like Apple Mail, the app. So if you
Yeah.
really like
Yeah.
Apple Mail and you don't really want to give up that experience of Apple Mail, you can access iCloud.com and click on Mail, and you'll have a very Apple Mail like experience, but by way of Firefox. Um, There are, of course, other components to macOS that get security updates. It's not just the web browser, it's not just the mail client. There are lots of components
Right.
that get updated, and sometimes updates are supplied for components that we discover a 0-day flaw in some Unix component of Mac OS that's been there for 10 years, and, and everybody's
Yeah.
like, we got to fix this problem. And patches get rolled out all over. Sometimes in cases like that, Apple will make an exception and roll out a security patch for an even older version of Mac OS than what they normally do.
Yeah.
Um, but the public facing apps, the ones that you interact with the internet, those are probably the most important in my opinion. But what do you think, Eric?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it's generally 2 years. And yeah, like you said, I like to think that if it's like a 0 day flaw, like you said, in some Unix component, that they'll make an exception and update further back than just, well, I mean, that's something more fundamental too. And, something like that, you think that kind of deserves to be uh, updated. But then there, yeah, I like I said, you never know with security, because the time I think that they've got most of the stuff fixed, they find some other weird thing
Right.
that Safari's got some flaw, especially Safari, more than even like Mail. But I think you covered everything. I mean, you can easily use a third party client, and I know this isn't necessarily for the the maybe the faint of heart, but it's also not that hard either. But open core is another
Mm.
possibility too, especially if you want to keep that older Mac, and you can keep it updated through that method. And that generally works really pretty well. And so um, if you're not ready to part with that Mac yet, Apple's not supporting it with the latest and greatest OS and security updates, that is a possibility. But um, yeah, I would think that, like, even though that it's 2 years, it seems like, maybe it's just again me liking to think that it won't be, that it could go a little bit longer than 2 years, either because there just is no security flaw, or, and a lot of these security flaws too, not saying that they're not bad, I mean, some of them are really terrible, but they're, a lot of them depend upon the the hacker, or the person getting physical control of your
Mm.
computer. And
That's true.
obviously that can happen, but it's not just some app somehow sneaking into your computer through a back door and installing itself, and then all having root privileges. It's there's a number of things that have to happen. And again, not these should be fixed, but you might be able to look at it in a case by case basis and say, is that going to happen? Is that
What is
I
the
mean,
severity of the flaw? That's the
right?
question. Right.
Yeah,
What is
and
the
and
severity of
and
the
the
flaw, and
possibility,
yeah, how likely are you to
yeah,
be to run into it as an everyday user? That's a good point.
yeah,
I more so with the flaws that are discovered outside of those public-facing apps. More so
yeah,
with the flaws discovered outside of Safari, outside of Mail. Those within Safari Mail, those, boy, it's tough to avoid those. And
yeah.
if someone is going to target Macs running a flawed version of Safari, they're going to target them, and you're
Hmm.
just as likely to run into that type of attack on, Facebook and Yahoo and Instagram and the places that sometimes accept third-party malicious ads when they shouldn't.
Yeah,
has been known to accept malicious ads from third parties as well. And until they're discovered and caught and squashed, which generally happens pretty quick, there's a large swath of users who are exposed to this malicious content, and it's because they haven't upgraded their computer, their Mac, Windows, whatever, Linux, or they haven't upgraded their browser. So if you are going to if you're going to continue running an older version of Mac OS, you're probably okay, but I would strongly suggest, as Lisa implied and we both overtly said, switching to a third-party browser and switching to a
yeah,
third-party mail client if required, and then keeping that browser and that client up to date as well. And at some point,
yeah, yep,
there will no longer be updates from them either. Google does stop releasing updates for Chrome a certain number of years back. You're not going to get the latest version of Chrome
yep,
on Tiger. It's just not
yeah,
going to happen. Same thing with Firefox. So you have to pay attention to that and see what the latest release is, see where you are, And if you are no longer offered updates, that's when you have to you have to express a little bit more concern about the software that you're running on that older Mac. But you do raise a great point about Open Core Legacy Patcher. We talked about that on the show before. It is a fantastic tool. It's a tool that I used myself on a 2012 iMac at the office up
Yep.
until just this summer. In fact, it was
Yeah.
only this summer that I switched over to an M1 iMac, and the reason I did the reasons I did are varied. Part of it was, however, some of the issues I encountered with OpenCore and that older uh, GPU on the 2012 iMac. I would get weird artifacts on the screen from time to time.
I remember
They would
that.
go away. I could reboot or whatever, and they would go away, but they
Yeah.
would pop up, and sometimes they got in the way. But I will say that 2012 iMac, it was a 27-inch iMac, Core i5 with Open Core Legacy Patcher and Sonoma, in some cases ran better than the M1 iMac that's that's running Sonoma right
No,
now.
no.
And it's mostly with those older Intel apps that the
Okay. I was gonna say that
Intel
just should be.
Mac just ran better.
Yeah.
On the whole, though, the Apple Silicon Mac just runs circles around that 2012 iMac. But Open Core Legacy
Right.
Patcher is a great way to go. And to extend that conversation just a little bit further, which is something that we promised to talk about on the show, and we have not. But there are several fantastic distributions of Linux that run phenomenally well on an older iMac. Macs as
Yeah.
older as, 2006, 2008, 2010. You
Yeah.
can bring life to those new Macs by running a modern distribution of Linux on them, and it runs fantastically. You wouldn't know that what you're running is a 14-year-old Mac, and yet there it is, and it's running great, and it's up to date, and it's current, and it's secure, and that's one of the more
Right.
important things. So
Right.
in a situation where you're not quite ready to upgrade to a new Mac, and you're not necessarily locked into apps that are Mac specific, switching over to a Linux distribution may be a great way to go if you're sporting an old Intel Mac. So,
Yeah. And I was going to say too, like you, I upgraded. I stuck Open Core on a 2012 MacBook Pro Retina, and I actually at that time only brought it up to Big Sur because I don't know what I was thinking, and but I was just impressed at how well it worked, and I'm like I should have put, I can't remember what the latest and greatest, if it was Ventura or I can never remember the order. uh, Sonoma wasn't out, but I was Emma had a friend, and I said, we're not using this anymore. She was using it at one point, so I stuck it on there, and we gave it to him. And but I was just really really impressed at how well
mm-hmm,
it worked.
mm-hmm. It
And
runs
again,
great.
this was probably 2021 timeframe, somewhere around there. So yeah, it just was really good.
And the latest version of Open Core Legacy Patcher is Sequoia compatible. So um, it's something I have not tested yet with that 2012 iMac at the office, and I intend to. But yeah, you can now load Sequoia on at least a Mac as old as 2012, if not slightly older. There are issues with older Macs that don't have metal compatible GPUs, and that's one
Yeah,
of
it
the
makes
things that
sense.
you want to
Yeah,
pay attention to. But it is possible. And the thing about this project is that without compensation, these developers behind Open Core Legacy Patcher are working tirelessly to assure compatibility with the broadest range of Macs possible. It
yeah,
it's amazing the amount of work that they put into this project without really any thanks. And I think
It's insane.
Certainly without any monetary compensation, and I believe a big part of that is because if they were to start accepting payment for this project, that's when Apple sits up and starts to take notice. But as long as it's an open
Yeah.
source project, um, thankfully Apple has turned a blind eye to it so far, and that's great. But it is a good way to go, and it's really not difficult at all. If you have
No,
ever
it's,
installed Mac OS on a Mac,
yeah.
other than a little bit of simple setup that you have to go through to create that initial flash drive, um,
Yeah.
installing
And
OpenCore on a Mac is
it's not
just as
hard.
simple. No, not hard at
Yeah.
all.
No, not hard at all. And you think that Apple would, I don't know. And I understand they want to sell Macs and everything, but you would think that Apple would, would like that, like what OpenCore is doing. One of the things that is another thing that's made the Mac great, the hardware, is that it does last so long, that it isn't junk that, you know, you now need to upgrade, 3 years later or whatever, that it does last. And, when it's really just kind of I want to say an artificial barrier, but I mean, when it is just sort of, and I know Apple has various reasons for not allowing the latest and greatest OS to run on an older Mac, and some of them are quite legit. But I mean, if you can get around some of that stuff, or you don't care, I think it's just, like I said, open core is just a great thing, and I think Apple should be as excited about it as the end users are.
Well, look, if nothing else, even if you never install Open, and we'll move on to Lisa's next point, but if nothing else, even if you've never installed OpenCore Legacy Patcher on an older Mac and run a modern version of Mac OS on that Mac, even if you've never done it, the sheer fact that OpenCore Legacy Patcher exists
Exists.
proves that it can be done. It proves that
Yep.
Apple could do it if they want to. And
Right.
perhaps in a future editorial rant, we ask the question, how environmentally responsible does Apple really want to be?
Yeah. Right, that's true. Because the fact that keeping an older Mac running longer, I on the one hand, you probably could make the argument, or Apple could probably make the argument, like, look, we are about building new Macs and pushing forward, and
Sure, of course.
trying to push the envelope. If other people want to keep their old stuff going, that's more power to them.
Yeah.
But we don't want to get into that, or support that sort of thing. But you're right, though. I there is an environmental impact part of it to it, again, Apple would probably say to some degree, look, that's why we use these um, materials that we use, so that it is recycled. That's why we use aluminum. That's why we use glass. That's why we use, you know, a lot more parts that are recyclable. So it isn't going to have as big of an impact, but still, it's going to have some. The lithium battery, there's plastics in there, and everything else that's going to be an issue.
It was something I've brought up on the show in the past, and I'll just mention it real quick, and then I promise we'll move on.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be great if Apple open sourced the core of the Intel release of Mac OS, kept proprietary rights for certain aspects of it, kept proprietary rights for this interface, the GUI that we interact with, but include it with it and
Right.
say,
Right.
here you go, folks. You can touch this, you can work with this, you can make this work on older hardware. We make it openly available to everyone who wants to play with it. The GUI aspect of it, that's ours, but we're going to let you use it if you want to. If you want to take it upon yourself to try to make this latest version of the core Mac OS work on your older hardware, knock yourself
Go
out.
for it. Yeah.
But here you go. Now, maybe that
Yeah.
opens up a can of worms that they shouldn't open when it comes to the underpinnings of Mac OS and what it would mean to the Apple Silicon version of it. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Someone smarter than me will fill me in on it. But wouldn't it be great
It would be
if
great.
Apple stood behind some of these projects and said, "Yeah, that's great. We don't want to develop hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm sorry, we don't want to devote hundreds of thousands of dollars to maintaining the Intel version of it. But if you want to maintain it, here you go. Enjoy."
The one thing I could almost hear Apple lawyers like, no, no, we're not for like for any number of stupid reasons that just lawyers would say no anyway. But the one thing I wonder is if that wouldn't spark the Hackintosh community, and if Apple wouldn't want that, if that would be the can of worms you're talking about. The
Well,
getting
almost
the
certainly.
latest Intel
Yeah.
uh, Intel processors to run Mac OS and sell these, bootlegger, type, maybe great Macs in their own right, and but at some point it'll be limited software anyway, but still, I guess that would be one of
Oh,
the issues I think that Apple.
you're absolutely right. And the Open Core project, not Open Core Legacy Patcher, but the Open Core project, it does exactly that. The whole point of the Open Core project is to allow the creation of Hackintoshes.
Hackintosh, yeah,
Open Core Legacy Patcher's entire reason for existing is to allow modern versions of macOS to run on older Apple hardware. No, you're right. You're
right.
right. And there are so many issues that would come up for Apple in doing so, but wouldn't it be great if
Wouldn't it be great?
stood behind a project like that and said, "Ah,
Yep.
we'll devote some resources to you, but we're not going to take it on ourselves."
Yeah. Yep.
Now, as you might expect, this type of conversation that we just had led to a discussion about what would be a great replacement machine for their older 27-inch iMacs. And after much back and forth, and you can tell from the conversation Eric and I just had that we probably provided far more information to Lisa than she
She
wanted.
ever wanted.
Lisa decided that the best way forward would be a new Mac Mini plus an Apple Studio display and a 15-inch MacBook Air. Great,
Yeah.
great choices.
Sweet setup.
And that is where the real fun began, because Lisa's new problem would be how much storage to get and where to put her massive photo libraries. And leading into that, Lisa asked, let's say I want all the photos in the huge half a terabyte library on an external drive, since I don't really look at most of them very often. Can that be done with the Mac Mini? And can I option shift so Photos opens the external library? And then that led to 3 specific questions, and we'll tackle these one at a time. First question, if the Photos library is on an external drive, when I open Photos on the Mac Mini, how do I point it to the external drive's Photos library? Second question, let's say I want to start a new Photos library on the Mac Mini. How do I do that and move to some photos to this new library? And then the third question, where is the music library? What's it called? Okay, so the short answer, the flip answer is yes.
Yes, you can. And
Yes,
that's
you
where we
can.
stopped. We
And
just
that's
said
where we
yes,
stopped. We just
and
said yes and said that's it. No more answers for you, Lisa.
you. Yeah.
Um, no. The truth is, yes, I do exactly that. I keep both my system photo library, that is the library that the Mac syncs iCloud photos to. I keep that system photo library, and I keep my music library on an external drive that's connected to my Mac Studio. And then my DSLR photo library, the one that I do not sync to iCloud Photos, is on yet another drive. And then those libraries can actually, thankfully, Apple had the foresight to create them this way. They can be freely moved around from one drive to another, or even one Mac to another, which is great. They look like a single file to us, but there's actually a whole folder structure inside this
Yeah.
thing that looks like a single file. That is your
Package.
photos library. And by default, this library is found under your home pictures folder. And speaking of inventive naming, it's named the photos library. And that is the library that you would copy or move, etc. Now, you
Right.
might have more than one. It sounds like Lisa has more than one library. And in fact, I believe she sent us a screenshot of all the different libraries that she has. And the key is making sure you're opening the correct one. And as she mentioned, and I'll mention again here, you hold down Option while you're launching photos, and then it prompts you for the library to open. The neat thing about photos is you don't have to do that every time. Whatever library um, if you hold down Option and launch photos and then select a library, that is the library that photos will open from that point forward until you tell it to open
Something
a
else.
different one, right?
Yep.
Or until you do the Option launch thing again. You can double click a library and open it as well. That's another way to do it. But if you uh, option launch, option launch photos, and then select a library, that's the library that will open from that point forward. Or likewise, if you double click a library to open it, that's the one that will open from that point forward. Um,
Yeah.
and and that's it. That's really all you need to know. You can put these photo libraries anywhere you want to, and whichever one you open last will be the one that opens every time. Now, the system library is a little bit different. The system library, the one that iCloud Photos syncs to, you have to specify which library is your system library within Photos settings.
Right.
Once you designate one as the system library, it does not have to be the primary one that opens when you launch Photos. The Mac just needs to know, oh, that's the system library. That's the one I'm going to sync iCloud Photos to, and that's it. It's pretty simple. Um, the only other thing I'll mention, and then I'll throw it over to you, Eric, and then we'll take Lisa's questions in order, is if you do put your photos library on an external drive, just make sure that Time Machine or Carbon Copy Cloner or SuperDuper or ChronoSync or whatever app you are using to create backups on your Mac, just make sure that it is aware of that external drive and will back it up. Time Machine kind of does that automatically. If you connect an external drive, it knows, okay, hey, I
Yep.
should probably be backing up this external drive. But ChronoSync and SuperDuper and Carbon Copy Cloner, you have to tell them. You have to say, oh, by the way, I now have this other drive. And when you do your automated backups, please back this up too. So that's just
Right.
something to keep in mind. And then, of course, speaking of backups, you need a backup drive that's large enough to hold all that stuff. But that was one of my initial replies to Lisa, and then we'll get to her questions. But did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
No, I think you covered it all. Just the whole option shift and then just saying this is my main photo library. You're to sync to iCloud. I don't think in that regard. I don't think they could have hardly made photos better or made it easier. And I know iPhotos to a certain point. iPhoto worked that way too, but I
It
can
did.
tell you using Adobe's Lightroom, which I do like. That's another
Yeah,
app. Just because it does have versioning the way that Aperture used to. Um, and it's just, I use that especially for my DSLR photos. But moving the library to an external drive, which you're supposed to be able to do, it always creates whenever I import new photos, it like creates a new library on my internal drive. It's just batty. So Apple definitely has a lot better thing there.
well, you actually raised a really good point, and this did come up at some point during our conversations with Lisa. But if your external drive is ejected or not connected to your Mac and you launch Photos, it will create a new Photos library. So that's just something to be
Yeah.
aware of. And it may even make it the
Yep.
system photo library. So if your external drive with your system photo library is not connected and you launch photos, eh, that could do
Yeah.
exactly what you were describing and create a new
Right.
photos library and make it the system photo library. And that's not what you want at all. So
That's exactly. So you do have to be careful with that.
you do have to be careful with that.
Yep.
But let me go to her first question. She asked three questions, and the first one was, if the photos library is on an external drive, when I open photos in the Mac Mini, how do I point it to the external drive's photo library? Well, as we said, um, you just open that external drive in the Finder, locate the photo library that you want to open, and you double click it. That's a really simple answer. Just
Yeah.
locate the photo library you want to open and double click it, and boom, it'll open in Photos. And then, as we mentioned, the other way is to hold down the Option key. While holding down the Option key, launch Photos, um, and you'll be able to select. Now, if you want to create a new library, which was one of her other questions, if she wants to create a new library, that is done with the Option key. You can't do that with just the Finder. You hold down the Option key, you launch Photos, um, and you select New Library, right? It just says New Library.
Right.
And
Right.
that allows you to not only select where you would like to create the library, but also the name you want to give it. So, for example, in my case, it's called Photos DSLR. I created another library, and that's where I put all my photos from my camera,
Right. Right.
right?
And I was going to say, I don't know if you mentioned this, but if you do hold on the Option key when you put up photo, when you start Photos, and it shows all of your photos, it will tell you which one is the system library,
Yes,
which
it
is kind of
does.
handy too.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it parenthetically says it, right? Doesn't it put it in
Yeah.
parentheses and says system library or something like that?
Yeah.
So you
System photos
know,
library or whatever.
yeah. It does get confusing if you have more than one library and those extras are not your primary. And that really was the case for Lisa. She had, gosh, what was it, like 8 different photo libraries, all with different dates on
Yeah.
them and all this kind of stuff. And some of them probably had the same photos as others. And we can talk about that briefly, how to solve that problem. Um, but if you just have one or two libraries, it's a fairly straightforward process. And if the
Oh yeah.
library you want
Yeah.
to open is not listed in the window, you can click Other Library, and then
And
that
find it.
opens up a little Finder browsing window, and then you can click on the external drive and find the library and select it. So Apple does make it really pretty straightforward and easy to manage different libraries. And as much as we kind of disliked it when Apple switched to this monolithic photo library method within iPhotos and Aperture,
Yeah.
um, the
Yeah.
best things that they did, and yes, we groused about it at first, but the best things they did were to switch to this new method of working with your photo libraries, and two, making them cross compatible between Aperture and iPhoto. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
those two steps alone were huge for making the management of libraries and where we store them on our Macs and how to move them around and all that kind of stuff so much easier.
Easier.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah. Oh, and we just touched on this. Her other question was, let's say I want to start a new library on the external drive. How do I do that? Um, as I said, you hold down the Option key, you launch Photos, and you click Create New. And then you give it a name and tell it where you want to save it, and now you've got a new library that you can select in the future.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, what was the other question she had here? Oh, um, I will bring up something that we talked about. It wasn't necessarily part of this question, but she had all those different libraries, and one of the things we talked about was how to kind of merge them all together into one. And the unofficial official way of doing that is not particularly fun. It involves going to those
Yeah.
different libraries and opening them in the Finder, finding the master photo library, copying those photos or bringing them to another location and then dragging them into the library that you want to drag them into. And that's great. That works. You want to make sure that you're finding your originals and you're bringing them into the library that you want to merge them into and all that kind of stuff. You can do it. You lose things like if a photo was a favorite. You lose things like edits to those photos that you might have made. You probably lose the facial recognition issues. Photos will have to go through and re-recognize faces in them. A
Yeah.
lot of the things that are part of a photos library you're going to lose when you do that, but you can do it. If you have no other choice, you can open up a library from the Finder, locate the originals within that library. It's part of the folder structure. Locate the originals, and then bring those into a different photo library. But there is a better solution. There's a much better solution. It's a fantastic tool for managing and merging your photos libraries, and it's called Power Photos. And I believe you use this too, Eric. I bought it many years ago. I actually originally purchased it for iPhoto. It's called iPhoto Library Manager or something like that. And fantastic app for managing all your libraries and more importantly, merging them. If you want to merge libraries, or you want to copy large groups of photos from one library to another, or even scan for duplicates. And I know Photos does that now, but um, Power Photos does a fantastic job of it. If you want to scan for duplicates, this is a really great tool to have in your arsenal. Um, I have used it mainly for merging libraries, uh, but I recommended that to Lisa, and she purchased it, and it just worked a treat for her as far as getting a grip on all these different photo libraries that she had. And that is fatcatsoftware.com/powerphotos. And I think it's, what is it, Eric? It's like $20. It's not a very expensive
Yeah.
application.
No, it's not for all that it does. Actually, it's a really good. And I hadn't used it. I actually was turned on to it by the emails, and I was like, "Wow, this is totally cool. Why have I not heard this before?" And
Yeah,
it's definitely, if you've got more than one photo library, it's and somehow even I'm sure there's a lot of people that just have one, but I mean somehow you just do end up with multiple
you do.
at different times. Even if it's just a matter of it's a new Mac or it's I'm moving to a different drive and I forgot to you know hold down option and whatever, so now it's using yet another library, and I need to merge these together. It's wonderful. It is really good.
The neat thing about it is you can open all of your libraries at once within the sidebar of Power Photos and
Yeah,
literally copy or drag and drop photos from one library to another, and information about those photos will be retained as it moves from one library to the other, which is great. And then Lisa pointed out as she started using the software, she actually used it to move her libraries from one location on her Mac to another, which is not a function that I used. And I went, oh, that's a great way to do it.
it's
And
great.
so she used Power Photos for that. Um, the we're going to talk about the music library in just a second, but I did want to point out that Fat Cat Software used to have a music library manager, and I did have a copy of that as well, but they look like they no longer develop that. So
No, see that. Yeah,
yeah,
see that as an option. No, the funny thing is, until I saw this Power Photos, I had kind of thought, why doesn't Apple make it like Final Cut Pro, where you can have access to your libraries all at once. You can have multiple libraries, events, everything else, drag stuff between it, copy,
mm,
and it's like, why could they not do that with photos? But I understand it's probably a little bit different user base, but still, it just,
well,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
Eric. Devil's advocate, they're still trying to figure out how to allow you to sort photos. So,
yeah.
we
It's
can't
still
ask
every
too much of them.
No, every update, I keep thinking this is going to be the one, and then I go there, sort by oldest photo first or whatever, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, what?
Still
Yeah,
not there. You can
it's
sort
still
them
not there.
within an album, but you
Yeah,
still can't sort them within your main photos library.
and why?
Unbelievable.
I
All
know.
right. So, third question, where's the music library and what's it called? Very simple. You're going to find it under your home folder and then the music folder. And by default, it's called music library. So,
Yeah,
very inventively named music library. And
yeah,
you can do the exact same types of things with the music library that you could do with your photos library, including moving it from one drive to another. In my case, it was much easier to just move or copy, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but to copy the music folder from my primary drive to my external drive, just in its entirety. And I know I didn't necessarily need to do that. I really only needed to copy the music library, but I moved the whole thing because there was other stuff in there, other music files, from Amazon Music and Google Play Music and all that kind of stuff, files I had downloaded in the past and weren't necessarily part of my music library, but I wanted to have within the same relative, area. So I just moved my whole music folder from my primary drive to, well, I did, you can't move the music folder. Let's just say that the music folder will be there in your home folder, but I created a new music folder on my external drive, and the contents of the music folder got moved over to that external drive. And then from that point forward, Apple Music knew to look on that external drive as long as the external drive is connected. So, same rules apply with your photo library. If you're going to put them on an external drive, make sure that drive is on and accessible when you launch the app that's going to be looking for those libraries.
yep,
Okay, so all of that led to the final question that we're going to discuss this episode, and that still is in the same relative range as the other questions, but copying the libraries to the external drive. How can I take one of these giant libraries and copy it over with it still being photos so photos can see it? What are the steps? Copy, paste? Do we drag the icon over to the drive? What do we do? Now, you had a comment on this, Eric, and I believe it involved the words Adobe is stupid. But and you probably already, in fact, I know you touched on this just a little bit. Um,
yeah.
but did you want to talk about what you recommended to Lisa first?
I'm trying to think. What was that? There was so many emails. Now,
I know. I know. Do you want me to read you
I,
what you wrote? I actually
yes,
copied it out
yeah,
of the. Okay, so here was Eric's advice. I'm just acting. I'm pretending to be Eric right now. Um, he responded that you would copy it in the usual way, which is drag and drop.
yeah,
But you rightly suggested that
right,
Lisa may want to use Carbon Copy Cloner because it's a
right,
bigger file and you have better error correction and error recovery, more importantly. Um,
yeah,
Either way should work. And then as far
yeah.
as launching it, you said what we've already said, which is just double click the photo library file on the external drive, and that will launch photos.
Photos, yeah,
And then here's the Adobe is stupid part. One thing you said, Photos and Lightroom both seem to really want their libraries on the main drive, which we discussed, especially
right.
Lightroom, but I think that's because Adobe is stupid. Yes,
Stupid.
that was your quote.
Yeah,
Scene.
yeah. It's me.
I am now
It's
done
me.
pretending to be Eric.
And you said it
Uh,
so much better than I could.
my response is I lean more towards keep it simple. You keep it
Yeah.
simple and you run into fewer problems. So
Yep.
I recommended the copy paste method. And
Yep.
if folks are a little confused by what I mean find the original photo library and then with it selected, either control click or right click and say copy, and then move to
Yep.
the new folder, the new location on the external drive, and control click or right click and paste. You can
Yep.
also use the menus, of course. You can edit, copy, edit, paste. You can do that too
Paste.
from within the Finder. You can drag and drop. If if you
Yep.
have Finder windows open for both, you can drag from one to the other. By default, when dragging to an external drive, it will copy, which is better and safer when you're talking about moving giant photo libraries like this.
Yeah.
Um, but the again, to be a little facetious, the longer answer is yes, yes. That's either method, whichever method you would like to do, either drag and drop or copy and paste. Yes, you can do
Yeah.
that, and that's the beauty of the photos library. Now, the longer answer, because we haven't made this long enough already, Eric. The longer
Right.
answer is if you feel like you need a little thrill, you can copy and move. I don't
Right.
recommend copying and moving. Again, there may errors may be introduced in the process, and you don't want to be partway through the process of moving a large photo library from one drive to another and have something catastrophic happen and not be able to easily recover.
Well, the one thing I will say with moving, in defense of moving, that the delete does not happen. It's a copy and delete. So it essentially copies the file, and then once it's all there safely, it deletes the in there. The
That's true.
problem
Yeah.
the problem is with that, and this is what I've run into because I've used the move a little too many times. Uh, if you if you hit undo, it will delete the file that you just copied to the new location. I don't know if they fixed this. It will
Mm.
delete that and not put it back. So now it's gone.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
Well, that's
and
bad.
yeah, that's really bad. So that's probably the number one reason not to use the move. Just, like I said, they did have some trouble with it earlier. This was a number of years ago, and they redid it, rejiggered it so that it copied it, checked it, deleted it. So that's basically a move is just a copy delete. It's just doing it
Mm.
for you instead of you having to do it. But the
That's a good
yeah,
point.
there
That's
is
a good
that.
point. Yes, and I did kind of think of that as I was saying those words, but still, I'm all when it
I
comes.
know.
Look, my DSLR photo library is like 1.2 terabytes.
Yeah.
I prefer to play it safe, and in my
Yep.
mind, moving it is not safe. But you're absolutely
No.
right. I- you're spot on. It does put the files in place first, and then it deletes the original. I guess I'd be a little worried about something having happened during that copy process where the copy is not fully intact in some way.
Right. Yep.
And there's then little recourse other than your backups. You do have your backups, right? You are making a backup.
Right.
Make a
You are
backup
making.
before you do this. Do not do
Yes.
this
Yes. Of course.
without a backup first.
No.
But, um, gosh, yeah, the move seems too risky to me. I wouldn't do that. But
No.
copy and paste and drag and drop are effectively the same thing. You end up with a
Yeah.
copy of the library on that external drive, whether it be a traditional hard drive or an SSD. That's a copy. You can open it, you can check it out, you can make sure everything's okay, make sure all is well, and then as long as everything looks good, you can delete it from the original drive.
Yeah. That's the way that I don't do anything like that. Any huge. I mean, if I do any moves, it's with smaller files that are, yeah, that I can either
Yes.
reproduce really easily or it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
do
photo
that too.
libraries are not. And in fact, I, again, too, if I had a 1 point, yeah, and I think it is getting up there, that large of a DSLR photo library, I might be tempted to use, CCC or ChronoSync, just because they generally seem to copy faster anyway than the Finder.
They do.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things where in permissions and all that stuff. I don't know, but most things I just use the Finder.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
That's just the easiest.
You rightly suggested Carbon Copy Cloner. Of course, Super Duper would work, ChronoSync would work.
Yeah,
All of those would work for doing this type of thing. And I think I even suggested as an alternative she could use Carbon Copy Cloner or ChronoSync. And I'm pretty certain from our past conversations, Lisa has Carbon Copy Cloner.
She does.
The benefit, of course, is that you can selectively copy files from one drive to another with it. Um,
Yes.
my only thought, and I guess this is a little facetious, but it's where my brain goes. It's a little like swinging a sledgehammer at a thumbtack. I mean,
Yeah, I
if
know. Yeah.
if all I need to do is
Right.
copy this library from one drive to another, well, I'm just going to copy it from one to the other. I'm not going to go through
Right.
the process of setting up a carbon copy cloner session and
Right.
but you're right. I think it'd be a little bit faster and a little bit better for error recovery.
If it's a big one, if it's not
Yeah.
that big, and not that, whatever, I would, like I said, I use the Finder for pretty much mostly everything, and I did mention this in the email too, but I do have something called Mac Backup Guru that I don't actually use for backups, but it does have a copy and paste that it sticks into your if you right click and you get a Finder menu,
Mm.
it'll have copy. You can copy it and then you can paste it just like you would with the Mac, the built-in Finder one. But it uses this app to do it, and it works. That app it copies faster than the Finder, and it works like um, CCC or
Mm.
Chrono Sync or Super
That's
Duper,
awesome.
and the fact that you can restart and resume and stuff like that. So um, I tend to use that one more for bigger stuff because it's easy and you don't have to, like you said, go into Carbon Copy Cloner and create some task to do it,
Right.
or
Right.
yeah, Chrono Sync. Like you said, that definitely is a sledgehammer to for a
To a
thumbtack.
thumbtack.
Yeah.
Which would be an amazingly fun thing to try sometime.
Oh
You
my
know, to
gosh.
hit a thumbtack with a sledgehammer would be just fun. Just fun.
Yeah. It
Um,
would be.
so those are the questions that I wanted to tackle this episode. Now, um, of those questions and the topic of moving libraries and things like that, was there anything else you wanted to bring up, Eric? Um,
No, I don't think so. No.
yeah, we talked about so much with
Oh,
Lisa, as I mentioned earlier. Gosh, we talked about how to merge libraries, and we did touch on that just uh, a little bit here. We talked about Power Photos, which is a great solution for that. Um, what else did we talk about? Best external drives to purchase. We talked
yes.
about just migrating general data, or the Apple's migration assistant in particular
Yep.
is what we talked about, and whether someone should or should not use that when setting up a new Mac. We
Right.
talked about merging libraries. We talked about other apps to aid in the process of setting up a new Mac when you're taking data from an old Mac. And we talked about backup methods and other ways of keeping data secure. But I really do want to know if there's something that you have a question on when it comes to setting up a new Mac or migrating to a new Mac, or just Mac questions in general. Just drop me a line, Mike at fromacguysonly.com or Eric at fromacguysonly.com, and we'd love to have your questions to talk about here on the show. And of course, we'll get you the answers before we talk about them on the show, just like we did with
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Um,
The
I I
yeah.
teased a little bit, Eric. I actually have a tip. We're going to get to your essential app in just a moment, but I have a
Oh
tip
yeah.
this episode. This is something that came up this morning for me, and it comes up, well, rather frequently, and you'll know why in just a moment. But as much as I like Apple's Magic Mouse, and yes, I know, as much as I groused about it when it first was released with the built-in batteries, I've actually come to love the built-in batteries. Um,
Yeah.
but one of the big issues I have with it is actually more software related than hardware related, and that's that Mac OS seems to not want to warn me about low batteries until they get down to like 2%. And that's what happened to me this morning. I do not seem to get the warnings that the batteries are
Yeah.
low, but I always get them when they're at 2%. And telling me that the battery's at 2%, well, I don't have a whole heck of a lot of play left until it conks out on me.
Right.
So, what do you do? Well, here's my tip. And yes, Apple says plug it in for 10 minutes and get a quick recharge, sure. But I,
Yeah.
I'm working Apple. I don't want to take 10 minutes, especially when the charging port is on the bottom. 10 minutes of downtime
Yeah.
where I guess I could go refill my coffee mug or maybe just stare at the ceiling for 10 minutes. But instead, here's my tip. Here's my actual tip. I know I said that a moment ago, but here's my actual tip. Here's what I do to stay productive while my mouse is taking a well deserved reset. I keep an old Magic Mouse on my desk. That's it. That's my tip.
That's a great
These
idea.
days, I'm guessing a lot of us have them sitting in drawers, starved of
Yep.
power because the AA batteries have drained or
Yep.
were removed completely. In fact, this one right here is one of the old battery driven Magic Mice. Well, guess what? They still work great.
Fine.
You don't need
Yep.
to have one of the mice with the built-in batteries. The old ones work just great. The big difference between them is the built-in battery. That's it.
Yeah.
So when my mouse with the built-in battery needs a break, I take another Magic Mouse that's sitting on my desk, turn it on, and I just keep working
Use that.
while my other
Yeah.
mouse is charging. Um, so that's it. I grab the old mouse and I just keep right on working. Now, the real tip here, though, is if you do have an old Magic Mouse and you want to do that with it, and by the way, I do this both at home here with my Mac Studio and at the office with my iMac. I have a spare mouse sitting there too. In fact, what I do at the office is I use my old mouse with the new Mac, and the new green mouse that came with the Mac is my spare because it's
Oh.
pretty and I don't want to mess it up. So
Yeah.
I keep the green mouse that's nice and pretty clean,
Yeah.
but that's my spare. And then my old mouse is my primary mouse on the iMac at the office. But in each location, I have an old Magic Mouse turned off, sitting on my desk, ready to go for when my mouse needs a charge. The
Yeah.
real tip here is to make sure that you pair it with your Mac before you need it.
Right.
If your
So you don't have
if
to
your
go
old
through
mouse
that.
is dead,
Yeah.
you can turn on the new one, but until you can pair it, you're not going to be able to use it. Um,
Yep.
Now here's a bonus tip. Bonus tip: don't forget that in a pinch, you can use any old mouse. It does not have to be a Magic Mouse. You can use
No.
any old cordless Logitech mouse. You can use any old corded Microsoft mouse, whatever you have sitting around, a mouse from a Dell, whatever you have sitting around. If it's cordless or corded, you can use it on a modern Mac. So even if an old Magic Mouse isn't available to you, just keep some old mouse sitting around on your desk so that when your built-in battery Magic Mouse needs a charge, you can keep on working.
Yeah. No, that's a great tip. That's a really good tip, actually. And somebody who uses the trackpad all the time, I don't even really think of that. So just because of it. Although I will say, and
Same
I'll have to.
applies though, right? I mean,
Same applies.
your trackpad needs charges too, but you can plug it in on the back.
You can plug it in on the back, and
Yep.
so it does. You don't really notice it. But the issue that I have to say is, and I've had this all along, and I've noticed it on their Macs too. It and it was good for a while, but the Bluetooth gets janky, and all of a
Mm,
sudden the cursor just, and then it'll go back to normal.
yeah.
And so half the time I've got it plugged in, and so I'll have to talk to you about that and see if you've got any ideas because I drove me nuts.
Well, I've
It's
actually
driving me
noticed that
nuts.
with the older Magic Mice. For some bizarre, unknown reason, as the Magic Mice get older, their Bluetooth connections become more and more tenuous. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what the issue is. It may have something to do with the fact that we just, look, it's a mouse, it's on my desk, it gets knocked around, we bang it on the
Yeah.
desk, whatever, it
Right.
probably has something to do with that. But even with the mice that have that occasional Bluetooth issue, that's still good enough to act as a spare when your primary mouse needs a charge. And
Yeah. Yeah.
if something happens and it just doesn't work well enough, yes, you can fall back on that. Just charge your mouse for 10 minutes, and you'll get
Yeah.
several hours worth of use out of it. But
Right.
yeah, what did it take? I that happened to me this morning, and I think my Magic Mouse charged up in an hour, and then it was at
Yeah.
100%. It doesn't take a
Yeah.
whole heck of a lot of time.
No.
And in the meantime, I could just keep working using the old Magic Mouse. So that is
Yeah.
my tip. We haven't done a Mac tip on here in a little while, and that happened to me this morning. I said, "Gosh darn it, I'm putting that in the show."
I need, yeah, no, it's good to bring the tips back too, because you used to have that uh,
Yeah, yeah.
a long time ago. Yeah.
But one thing that we do every episode is our essential app pick. In January, we did our annual essential apps episode, and we had so many gosh darn apps that we said, hey, we should do a new one every week. And
Yeah.
not only have you and I presented essential apps that we like, but when we have a special guest on the show, or we bring our other co host on, Darren, we ask them to
Bring
share
them
one of
there.
their own essential apps. And this
Yeah.
time, Eric, I believe it's your turn to share an essential app. So, what is your essential app pick this week?
My essential app is an app called DisplayBuddy, and it's relatively new. It's been around maybe, I'm going to say a year, so it's probably at least a couple of years. But what its whole reason for existing is to kind of essentially be able to software control your non-Apple monitors. So if you've
Oh,
got a ViewSonic or a Dell or who knows what, and you kind of get tired of either having to reach around the back of the monitor and try to feel around to hit the right button, or I think I had a ViewSonic one where I had to touch. It was like a touch sensitive one that was in the
those
front, but
are
it was,
awful.
oh my gosh,
Yeah. My Dell
it
is
was
that way
terrible.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, this uses it's got a couple different control modes, or like three. But one of them is it's got DDC/CI, which I think is for most standard monitors, and so it uses that to control the monitor. For Apple monitors, like the Studio Display, it uses the Apple Display Protocol. If It also has Samsung Smart for Samsung monitors, and then also ultimately it has software controls. So, but basically it's for controlling the brightness, the volume, the contrast. Those are the big things, and so that you can just essentially either control those with the brightness keys or the volume keys. Now, most of the standard monitors that are non-Apple have terrible speakers, so I don't generally use that. But in my case, right now, I've got an Apple Studio Display as my main monitor, and I've got what you call it, a LG display, which is it's not Apple, but it was made for Apple, so it's I think LG Ultrafine. It's a little bit older now, but one of the things that happens, even though I've got the LG monitor set up as a secondary display, it you can't control the brightness of it. It used to be that you could hold down the Option key and control the brightness. Now you can't. So the cool thing is with the Display Buddy is you can sync the two monitors up. So I have the LG synced to the Studio Display. So when I turn up the brightness or up or down, or more importantly, it has an ambient light monitor sensor. It goes up or down by itself as needed. It'll take the LG display with it
Oh,
through
cool.
Display Buddy. And the other cool thing is if I want to do the LG monitor manually, if I move the mouse over to the LG monitor and hit the brightness buttons, it'll control just that monitor. So I've got kind of all the bases covered with that. And it's got a whole bunch of other features too. Like you can set presets where you can say, okay, I want this for this brightness setting for during the day. I want this, brightness. Maybe at night I want to do this or whatever. So you can set up presets for it. You can also change resolutions on the monitor. It's got a whole bunch of extra resolution settings that I think you generally can't find in um, the display pref pane or setting panel. Um, and then another thing they added recently, they're always adding new things, is even for like the MacBook Pro with the HDR display and the bright 1600 nits, you can actually, if you move the brightness all the way to the max on a MacBook Pro, it'll give you a new slider to do the extra brightness that essentially pushes it up to the 1600 nits. So you can make your MacBook Pro monitor super bright.
Mm.
And I know that kicks in at certain points, but Apple doesn't generally allow you to manually control that. Well, DisplayBuddy does. So they've got just a ton of different features. And again, I'm trying to think if this is a subscription app or not. I know it's one of the apps I'm using with as part of SetApp, but I think it might be. I'll have to double check. Even if it is a subscription app, I think it would be definitely an app I would use just because it has so many great features, and it's one of those things that um, has really helped me.
That is a an app found at DisplayBuddy.app.
Yeah, display by the app. Yeah, not app.
And as you pointed out, you can get it on SetApp. So if you have a SetApp subscription, you can get it there. And if you click to answer your question, if you click Buy Now, you can get a single license for $18.99 to use it on one Mac, a personal license to use it on up to two Macs for $22.99, and a team license to use it on up to five Macs for $29.99. All of those are fantastic price points, especially
Really
if you
good
have
deals.
more than one Mac. I guess if you have only one Mac, there's no point in paying more than $18.99. But if you
Right.
if you have an office
Multiple.
Mac and a home Mac or whatnot, it's just a small bump in price to be able to use it on multiple Macs. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's fantastic because that is one of those things that has always been a little bit of a frustration for me when
Yeah.
I don't have at the moment. I used to have, but I don't currently have an Apple display. I have a Dell display. Dell makes great
Yeah.
displays. Dell
They
Dell
do.
uses LG panels, much like
Yep.
Apple does
Apple does.
in many cases. But that's I'm not using an Apple display right now, and the inability to adjust some of the settings in the display without, like you pointed out, the little tiny touchscreen buttons on the front that you can barely
Yeah.
see anyway. They're not even physical
Right.
buttons. They're
Especially
little tiny light gray circles on the front of a black bezel. And you have to
right.
try to see these things and touch them and
Yeah.
then know which one does what and what order you have to press them in. And it's
Yes.
a mess. So to be able to um, adjust the settings of the display through an app in my menu bar would be fantastic.
No, it
Now,
really is. And yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and if you, I don't know if you're like me or not, but I'm not one of these people that runs at night with all the lights on. So then trying to find that little button on the front of the monitor is even
Right,
harder.
right.
And I will say too, besides not allowing me to control the brightness manually, it doesn't for some reason, even though the LG display has a brightness and ambient light sensor, when it's in the secondary monitor mode, it doesn't seem to work. So that'll stay bright, even though the Apple monitor at night will have dimmed down to an appropriate level. The LG monitor will still be on daytime brightness practically. And so by being able to hook up or sync the LG to the Apple monitor, the studio display, it keeps that from happening, which is, again, really nice. So,
There's another feature of this which I just can't, I scrolled down to look at all the different features available, and everything that you mentioned is here. Controlling
yeah,
your display settings, creating presets, using multiple displays, syncing your displays, Ultra bright, as you pointed out, is one of the
Yeah.
features. The ability to control Apple displays. Um, Heck, it works with Siri and Apple shortcuts. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Nice.
But a couple things stood out at me here. One is that you can set up keyboard shortcuts,
Yes.
which
With the
is
presets.
great. So it works with the presets of your keyboard, I presume.
Yeah.
The other thing that stood out at me is the ability to change inputs. One of the nice things about the Dell and the
Yeah.
LG and other third-party displays is if you buy a nice display, you're going to have more than one input on it. You're not just going
Yeah.
to have HDMI, you're going to have DisplayPort, a mini DisplayPort, or HDMI, or heck, in some cases, DVI and VGA, and all
Yeah.
these different USB-C, all these different types of inputs on it. And according to the feature set here, you can use DisplayBuddy to change your inputs. So if you want to switch your display input from HDMI to DisplayPort, you can do so with DisplayBuddy. And I can think of one
Yeah.
situation where that would be super, super useful for me. The downfall is that I would be switching to a device that's not a Mac. And so I couldn't be running DisplayBuddy on that other device. So to switch back again, I have to fiddle with the little controls on the monitor. But heck, just to be able to do it the one time, to cut the
Yeah.
fiddling down to one instance versus two instances would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah. So
Well,
you wouldn't be able to use it on that second input. But yeah,
I presume
I
there's a
wonder.
trial of it, but they do
Yeah.
mention that it works with, well, gosh, they list like 12 different manufacturers here, including many that we've already mentioned: LG and Dell and Samsung, Apple, Hawaii, BenQ, Acer, HP, Gigabyte, AOC, Asus, and I presume more than that even. So
Yeah.
it's got broad compatibility for a little bit of cash, and I did not check to see if there's a trial available, but if you can, test it first to make sure it's going to work with your display, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you'll know for sure.
Yep.
And I would almost think there's got to be a trial. And again, I don't know for sure because I haven't, I got it through SetApp. So, but
Yep.
yeah, no, I've just, and it's been one of those things where, it's not as nascent as it was, but it is something that they're still really busily adding features to. And, it seems like every other month they come out with something cool, like,
Yeah.
like Ultra Bright, it's just, oh, that's awesome.
Well, and set app. Look, if you want to
Yeah.
trial a whole bunch of different apps for the Mac, set app is a
Yeah.
great great way to do it. Um,
Yeah. It
but I
really
did
is.
look. There is not a trial. There isn't something you can download and test first, but you do get a refund anytime within 7 days of your purchase. And certainly,
Okay.
if you're
That's
buying
cool.
this and it doesn't work with your display for whatever reason, and there isn't a patch available to make it work with your display, they're willing to give you a refund within the first 7 days of purchase. So make sure you test it
That's
right
cool.
away. But
Yes,
otherwise,
definitely.
yeah, fantastic app. That's a great
Yeah.
suggestion. And you had asked at the beginning if I had a list of the essential apps that we talked about so far, and certainly anyone can go back and pull up previous episodes of For Mac Guys Only and see which essential app we talked about in any particular episode. But I think a good idea, Eric, would be to wrap up this year with a full rundown of all the essential apps that we talked about. Not
Yeah.
necessarily with a full review or anything, but just, reminding folks,
Listed.
list them all out. Maybe it's just a
Yep.
separate blog post or something on the For Mac Guys Only site, but we'll list them all out again at the end of the year with links so that you can go download them directly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that would be terrific.
Yep.
Because like I said, it was hard for me to remember everything. And when I was reading that list, I'm like, oh yeah, there were some apps that I wanted to check out and had
Yep.
forgotten to. So yeah, no.
I know. You wanted to use Banana Bin, but
Yeah.
Banana Bin's awesome.
It is.
And with that said, that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, I do love to get your letters. So if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, or a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or you would like to share some of your own questions on switching to a new Mac or migrating to a new Mac, or heck, keeping an old Mac running longer than it should, you can leave your thoughts in this week's show notes found at formacguysonly.com, or you can drop me a line, mike@formacguysonly.com. And be sure to subscribe to the show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV and click the little notification bell so you can find out when we are going live, join the chat room, and catch all the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. And by the way, if you are watching on YouTube and you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and we'll that helps us out on YouTube as far as recommendations and things like that. So be sure to do that as well. Eric, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
As usual, Eric at For Mac Guys Only and .com. And I, like Mike, I love getting your mail, and although probably Mike could always help you better, I do know a few things too. So that would be terrific too.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Eric for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time. All right. Thanks for sitting in, Brian, and thanks to everyone else who is watching the episode with us today.
Oh,
we'll see you next time.
Very nice.
Yeah.